On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Snap One acquiring Parasol and Orro suspends business operations. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 352, Meeting Qualifiers.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Daylight, the leading producer of high-quality projection screens worldwide, and by Crestron.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Katye McGregor-Bennett. She's the president of KMB Communications. How you doing, Katye?
No, Matt, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for the invite. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, it is Halloween today.
It is.
It is. I was in Home Depot today, and there was a bunch of grown adults dressed up, which always gives me pause. And on that note, then we have Mr. Henry Clifford. He's the president of Livewire and the co-founder of Parasol. How you doing, Henry?
Matt, I'm great. Happy Halloween. It's great to be with you. Good to see you, Katye.
You as well.
I did notice that none of you dressed up.
Well, I mean,
you dressed up as yourself?
It's a throwback costume for Henry. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah.
Wow. Ooh. All right. What she's alluding to is a story that comes to us from AVNation.tv. It's our own website, and I got it wrong. Snap One has acquired the leading remote support subscription service, Parasol. That's the aforementioned one that Henry founded. Snap has announced the acquisition after, I think it was about a year ago. They invested into the platform directly. If you don't know Parasol, one, you should, but two, it is a wonderful remote support system that's based kind of on Overseer, and you can use it to support your clients, so you don't have to until they actually need you. So, Henry, I want to start with you on this because, well, you're kind of the focus of this one. What does this mean going forward for Parasol clients, as far as dealers, and for end users? With the acquisition by Snap.
Yeah, it's great. And I think the first message we're sort of delivering is this is kind of good news, great news. And really nothing's changing from a day-to-day perspective. So I got great partners. So my fellow co-founders, Greg Simmons with Eagle Sentry, he works for Snap One already as outreach champion with Snap One. My partner, Ted, runs the day-to-day at Parasol. So none of that really changes. It's just really an exciting opportunity now to sort of fold Parasol into sort of the Snap One multiverse and really pour some gasoline on top of what we've already done over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, which is build this thing into a place where we've got 500 plus dealers around the world and thousands of homes and businesses we support. So this is just nothing but great news for the industry. Nothing changes. We're still supporting the same way we did. We're still hiring integrators to staff our call centers. It's always been sort of for integrators by integrators. It'll continue that way. We'll continue supporting non-Snap One brands. So all the things that made Parasol successful will continue on. And so we just couldn't be any more excited about it. And it's a really great move. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Katye, what does this mean for kind of the support picture in general? Henry mentioned that they have over 500 dealers right now that are working with Parasol. Obviously, we know the community is significantly larger than that. And the Snap community, being of itself, is significantly larger than that. Does this raise awareness? Does this become, one of those tiers that Snap dealers just kind of roll into? I don't want to say automatically, but a little bit easier
No, I think outside perspective, obviously looking in is, I think it's a beautiful marriage. I think we probably saw the indicators to this, as the article alludes to, in the fact that there was an investment in 21 that complemented the acquisition of Access Networks, who we work with on the KMB side. So not to say that we saw this coming, but it definitely was. This marriage has been sort of forming seemingly behind the scenes for a few years now. I think as we're looking at sort of the state of the industry today and the state of things to come, one of the things that we're going to continue to fight for the foreseeable future is skilled labor shortage, right? And having technicians and support in place to be able to provide the type of support that these systems that we're installing, and as they continue to advance and evolve, that support is only going to increase. So finding ways to make that not necessarily a manned a manned event every time, and to have have systems and products in place to do that remotely will continue to provide a lot of advantage and benefit to the integration community at any time. I'm a big fan of time saving and streamlining operations. So I think that this just points to the fact that the industry has matured in the networking category in such a way that we now realize the best way forward, or at least the most effective and efficient way forward for the masses. Obviously, there are going to be integration firms who are still going to do their own thing, or going to go with another provider, and that is certainly fine. I mean, you know your business and what it needs, but if you're like the majority of the industry, where you are strapped for time and don't have all of the resources at your fingertips that you need to support the business that you have and that you want, having things like this and having mergers and acquisitions take place that simplify the process and shorten the timeline to execution is beautiful. So long-winded way of saying, I think it is a beautiful marriage, and I think that it's only upside potential here for the industry. And I think it's just great brands coming together, continuing to come together under that Snap One umbrella. The multiverse, Henry, that was a great way of putting it. Under the Snap into the Snap One multiverse you go. But it's the brand is evolving and kind of crushing it. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, that's very, very true. All right, let's change topics for a moment. This comes to us from Residential Tech Today. Orro suspends manufacturing and business operations in an email to both press and dealers, and posted online and littering through the Facebook forums and all the other things out there. A letter from the CEO stated that the 4-year-old smart lighting startup was going into kind of a pause, I guess is the best way to say it. They are no longer manufacturing or distributing at the moment for the next 6 months. They've committed to a minimum of 6 months of ongoing support. After that fact, if nothing else changes, some of their integrations and other things may start to not work anymore. And again, read the article, read the letter from the CEO, Colin Billings. Essentially, what seemed to have happened with Orro is they had some financing that had pulled out a couple months ago, and in working to replace that funding, that didn't happen to the point where they were expecting it to, and thus this is where we are today. Now, just before we go to the panel on this, I will say I've been back and forth with Patrick Gall from Orro, their head of media relations, or PR, I should say, quite a few times on this, because it's an interesting story to me. It's also, I've got some of their dimmers in my house. We had been doing a long-term demo with the product, and their goal is to find additional funding so that they just kick everything back up and keep running. And since that letter's gone out, they've had more talks about that. So that's an added, I don't want to say a wrinkle, but that's a glimmer of hope for Orro and anyone who's jumped on board with Orro. Katie, let me start with you on this one. What does this type of letter and an announcement mean for Orro as the company, Orro dealers, and then Orro end users? And I, just before you answer, I do want to applaud. Typically, when we see a company shut down, it's literally like a press release, and they're suspending immediately, and everything's over now. The way they've gone about this has been very upfront, which I think is really awesome. Again, it's a terrible situation, but they've been very upfront about it. So what does it mean for Orro, for their dealers, and for their customers?
So I haven't had the same conversations that you've had. So everything I have is outside looking in. So and therefore opinion based, not fact based.
Yes.
I to your point, I commend the Orro team on getting in front of the news and giving some timeline to this that isn't as of midnight 01. Your host, because it's all too often that is how we are notified of these things, and then it's up to the individual to react, respond, and recover on behalf of the brand that just shut its doors and kind of braked a whole bunch of product out in the field. So I think that there's the big takeaway just from a brand perspective is this is absolutely the way to do it when you can do it. I think what's most notable in this is the transparency of the company. That's a big deal, right? And the younger generation and those coming up into their professional career are watching brands. I wrote about this for Residential Systems earlier this year. Be a brand to believe in. Orro has presented itself as a brand to believe in, and now I think honestly, like sort of, you're kind of rallying behind them too. As I hope they make it. They make it, right? And so I think that there's a lot of positive strategy in doing that, but more importantly, is just not putting an integration community that you've just warmed up onto a product and doing business the way that you and yours intend to, warming them up to that, and then just shutting the door and leaving them out in the cold. You'll never get that integration community back, right? So this way of just saying, hey, look, we've run into some problems. We realize it. We're going to just pause. I think just by simply putting it into that perspective, you're not turning off the buyer. And you're also not necessarily putting them in a horrible position because you haven't stopped answering the phones. All of this, theoretically, the support behind just to get, out of today's conundrum is good. And I do wish that more brands could do it. It is a very special situation. There's, a lot of times this just isn't possible when you've got a publicly traded company or you've got investors behind and that decision is made. It typically isn't made of, yes, but we'll go ahead and continue losing money for another 90 days. We're not going to lose another penny. So as of midnight 01, it's done. Right. But there's a lot of conversation that goes up to that decision being made. And so, I just come back and I'll close on that transparency thing. And I think from a brand perspective is a very, very, very wise move because it doesn't turn the audience off to what might possibly happen down the road if they're able to turn this around, right? Had they taken the other route, the more typical route, hell no, we won't go. No one's gonna get behind a brand that does that again, unless they're really convinced, and that takes money. So, I think they've done a really good job. I hope that they can pull it off. But time will tell.
What is your recommendation or your advice to integrators that have gotten on board and have product in the field, and they've got customers who, again, maybe they're just using it as a light switch right now, but maybe they're controlling their Sonos. Maybe it's their primary, intercom. Maybe it's like it has some really good integrations that a lot of people are trying to use. And 6 months from sometime last week, those integrations may not function. What's the best role for the integrator to do?
Oof. So I'm going to jump in and out of this one quickly and hot potato over to Henry. Because that's a tricky one. But I think, take what I was saying about the brand here and being transparent, being forthright, and having the conversation quickly. So I think on behalf of the integrator who's bought and installed on behalf of their client, get in touch with Orro, which I'm assuming one still can do it. That may be easier said than done. I don't know, but really get to understand your specific situation for those installations that you have. And, based on what they know today, they should be able to provide an answer. But if you don't pursue having that conversation, you're sort of setting yourself up for potential big failure, right? I'm just a big advocate of getting in front of the conversation and using that extra runway to solve the problem. So if the answer that you get from Orro for your particular installation doesn't put you at ease, then you need to make a different decision and things need to go into play now. But if you talk to them and they give you an answer that sounds right for that particular installation in that situation, then the team player in me says give them a shot. If everybody bails out right now, that's certainly going to foresee the conclusion that may or may not already exist, right? So,
Yeah.
but if it's still right for the situation as it is today, and you have a client who accepts and understands that tomorrow may be a different result, I think you need to have that conversation with Orro, and then obviously be just as transparent with your clientele. Let them know what's going on. It's totally out of your control, so you shouldn't be held accountable. But if you don't say anything and you're not communicating, then you absolutely should be held accountable. So
we know that's not how that works. We're
I
always
know,
accountable.
right. So here's that hot potato. Henry, help!
You sold me this piece of junk, Henry. I do want you to touch on that from the integrator side of how do you have that conversation with your client, not just about Orro, but kind of the broader aspect of this, right? It's a startup brand. They've got a really cool product, so you jump on board. The downside of jumping on board with a really cool product is this happens more often than we'd like to think. Or worse, that cool product gets purchased by a larger company who runs it for a year or 2 years, and then they fold it. And like I had a conversation last week with a potential client over the fact that universal remotes don't exist anymore. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we have we have 2 lines that we can sell you. And she's like, no, they don't exist, because she read about Logitech shutting down. And that's the only one she's ever heard of. And thus, they don't exist. How do we go about not only communicating these concerns with our clients, but as business owners, how do we go about evaluating and determining when to bring on that fancy new product?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we all tend to be from Missouri to some extent in the CI world, where Missouri is the show me state, where we like to learn our lessons the hard way. I'm not going to delude myself into thinking that anybody's going to just take our word for it, that they're just going to go ahead and learn the hard way, which is fine. That's how we did it. I think after maybe 2 or 3 bouts of shiny object syndrome, I hopefully there's kind of a process that sets in of saying, okay, and this, by the way, this comes from IT, or there's a bunch of industries that have existed well before we existed.
Construction does this.
Oh yeah, because anytime there's a new shiny object, you go talk to any IT manager, they will tell you they don't touch a published update or any bug fix or anything like that, usually for like 6 months or something. Like they'll just sit and they'll kind of wait for the bodies to sort of float by, downriver. So that sort of conservative approach, and I probably sound very boring, but boring actually is something that like makes for a peaceful, day to day. So with something like, especially something that's going in the wall or something that's getting built in, we really think long and hard about that. What's this company? Are they solid? Do they have good financials? What's their revenue model? Is there something free associated with it? If it's free, we're probably the product. I'm thinking about sort of evolutions like you were just talking about. Amazon acquired Orro. Logitech stops making the Harmony remote. And so at the end of the day, we have a bias generally towards fairly high margin products, especially when they're built in, that are fairly well established in the space. But there every now and again, there comes along cool form factors like a Neo remote or like an Orro in-wall user experience, that these are game changers. And what we generally see is they'll get gobbled up and acquired. So with this, rather than these smart home pucks that were going dead a few years ago, I feel like now we'll start to see potentially, like if you look at like a Brilliant, for example, Residio's gotten real cozy with them. If they start to flag and have issues, I wouldn't be surprised if, somebody like a Residio takes advantage of that, does an acquisition, and now all of a sudden they own sort of household share where clearly they're monetizing that data somehow. So I think as integrators, what do we do besides learning things the hard way is hopefully we put it in ourselves, test it, and we do a lot of waiting, and we do a lot of vetting, and just determine personal minimums for ourselves and say, hey, we're willing to take on new lines if they meet certain criteria, selling margin, service, the company's fundamentals are strong. But without a framework like that, running a CI business, that's gonna bite sooner or later.
Is there a concern that, and not just Orro, but any of these cool startup companies, if you were at Expo and you walk, the used to be called Innovation Alley, and it's something else now, I don't remember, but there's always some cool things. But every time I see one and look at it and go, oh, that's interesting, I bet they'll get acquired because it's cool, but it may not have the legs to get there themselves. And it reminds me of some of the technology that gets promoted by companies like Google or Facebook or Amazon that come out with a huge splash and then die within a month. I saw something on one of the CEDIA Facebook forums, I think 2 weeks ago, about this like home conferencing pod that Google was flaunting. And somebody was like, oh, when are these going to make it into homes? And being the highly positive person I am, I said, they will silently kill this in less than 3 years. Don't spend a dime on it. Is that a concern? Because we've all bought into product lines that failed. How do you insulate yourself, or how do you communicate with somebody when that happens?
Being candid with clients never hurt anybody either. So if there's a fit with the product, and for example, I mean, half the time taking on these extra lines, usually driven by some client that we think, we just gotta have, it's a dream job and let's do it. But if we make the mistake of shouldering risk, or taking on risk where we can't control it, and then not cluing the customer into that, I think we make huge mistakes there. Versus if we get a call about a shiny object from a client, because that happens all the time. They read something in the Wall Street Journal, get the call. Really what they've done is raised awareness. Hey, why don't we have one of these Ring doorbell things? Hey, great. Let's talk about that. And then let's make sure we pivot the conversation the right way. But I think that when we're assuming risk that we have no business assuming, and not transferring that risk back down to the customer and saying, okay, we've told you all these things could possibly happen. It could break, it could brick, it could turn into a paperweight. You're still okay with this. Great. But I'd say more often than not, it's just down to a lot of us are out here selling not necessarily to win, but we're playing not to lose. And that can get us in trouble because we can get over our skis and just say yes and nod. And we're just afraid to lose the job. And oh my gosh, what if they go somewhere else? And so I feel like us as an industry, we can tend to not be confident and lean into the conversation because we're afraid that they might say no and they might reject us. And that can get us into trouble later, because what starts off as an issue this big on paper, then by the time we get into the field, turns into just, nightmare scenarios. And we've done some of these jobs where we've created those issues. We've taken over, thankfully, more of them than we've created. But it really all starts back at that design and engineering phase where we can panic in private and fail on paper.
Yeah, that's a good point. Katie, I want your opinion on this, but I want to preface it with this aspect. The majority of times we talk about this, it's always that startup or that DIY product, or that generally accessible consumer tech product. But we've also seen it from major players in our industry. The one I always go back to, because it affected me and our company, was Crestron Prodigy. It was great on paper from a huge company, and a bunch of people bought in. And we had clients in the field that had it. And then they canned it because it sucked. With all due respect to all our friends at Crestron. But it was terrible. And then we had clients who are pissed at us because we sold them a product from a very well-established company that then just got canned. And we couldn't expand it. We couldn't grow it. All the things that we promised them because it was from this major company, and it could be literally any company out there in our business. I'm just picking on Prodigy because it was fun. Or Adagio fit that bill too. Same era. What do you do? How do you have that conversation with a client when you're the one who pushed this and you leveraged the quality of the manufacturer to push it?
So I can answer this from a communicator's perspective. I am not answering from an integrator's perspective.
No, we want the communication
right.
side.
Yeah. So merely from a communications standpoint, it kind of the same thing that I preach. Already done it once or twice here, and that I do every time I come on is get in front of the conversation, be transparent, be forthright, and I think that those are three good tools to utilize anytime with any product, any pitch, any customer. What I might also suggest is this might be something to take a look at your contracts and identify with your legal professional whether it's fair and reasonable to put in a clause or a statement that essentially secures the point that you as the integrator are reselling somebody else's product. And therefore you are bound by the limitations of being a reseller. And you're not in the engineering side. You're not responsible for the delivery, the design, or the productivity of the product as much as you would love to be. I think that there needs to be a really clean break between the integrator being on the line for a product that is no longer being supported versus a product that the integrator installed incorrectly and isn't working functioning properly. Right? One of those scenarios, the latter, it's on you. On the former, it shouldn't be on you. So to me, it seems obvious that, just again, from a communication standpoint, that you have clearly defined with your manufacturer partners or whoever you're sourcing from, and really do take time to read that fine print. Who holds the bag when a product is no longer supported by the manufacturer? And I think, there's a bit of a precedent for this as new products coming to market, but there's an equal precedent for end of line scenarios as well, and even if the greatest product out there and it's been EOL'd after 10 years and it's still performing fine in the field with your client, you probably need to have something in place that says, but it is outside of our control at this point. And we do have recommendations for switching off of that to something that we can influence a better performance result day in and day out. Right. So, I think there's kind of different ways of looking at the scenario, but having something very much in place that protects you for the reseller of somebody else's product that may or may not continue to be supported and to support your needs. I also think that's kind of important to have in place for your own protection as well. I mean, in order for you to go and continue to work on these products that are no longer supported, you're going to incur cost. So have that conversation up front and get that contractually established. With new upstarts, I think that it's just smart, and don't turn away the new product or the startup or but protect yourself. And I think both you guys have said, Matt, you've got Orro in your house, and Henry, you mentioned it too. I think, definitely bringing this stuff home and taking it through and through all of the routines and all of the complexities that it claims it's capable of. Try for yourself and make sure that it really does live up to those promises, particularly if it's a new product and a new company.
All right, let's wrap it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Henry, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Livewire or Parasol, where can they do that?
Sure. Yeah, we're online. GetLivewire.com, GetParasol.com, and then my handles are at GetLivewire and at GetParasol, and email or phone. Party on. It's great to be with you guys today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Katie, if people want to connect with you, learn more about KMB, where can they do that?
Yeah, so if you're looking for KMB, look for KMB Communications all around the sphere. It's either KMB Communications all one or with an underscore between KMB and comms. We're the one with Little Mountain. If you're looking for me, look for Katye McGregor-Bennett or some variation thereof, because, in the middle there I got married and, I got 3 names. Let's deal with it.
There we go. All right. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.